If you have aches and pains inside your knee joint, well, guess what? You can fix it. And in this video, I'm gonna show you several different ways that I fixed my own knee pain and how you can too. Let's talk about the 3 keys to healthy knees, and this is gonna be super important for you to remember. So key number 1, this is probably the most important key that most people do wrong. It's to make sure that your knees are going the same direction as your toes, right? So I'm gonna stand up and do a sit to stand, go from sit to standing. I'm gonna show you what most people do wrong, okay? Most people do this wrong. They stand up and their knees cave in like this, and they stand up like that, okay? And anytime they sit down, their knees cave in like this, and then they fall down like this, all right? So if you find yourself standing up from a chair and your knees are caving in like this, you are putting a lot of pressure on your knees. Let me explain why, all right? So I got my little knee model right here. The knee is a hinge joint. It's supposed to go forward and backward, forward and backward. What happens when we cave our knees in is this. It goes backwards, but it also twists and grinds to the side. When we do that, we're pulling on these ligaments, we're grinding on our meniscus, we're causing potential aches, pains, and injuries that aren't necessary. And so making sure your knees go over your toes is one of the most important things that you can do in any lower body movement, especially when you go from sitting to a standing position. So the way I like to think about it is this. I go from a sitting position to a standing position, I look down, I make sure that my thigh bone's going right over my feet on both sides. I can use my hands on my knees for support and also to make sure I feel that inward wobble if needed. I bow forward from the hips. I don't round my back forward. I just bring my belly button towards my thighs and I drive into my heels and I make sure those knees are going over the toes. That doesn't necessarily mean they're straight forward like this. For a lot of people with knee pain, it means a little bit of a wider stance and a little bit of pushing the knees out so that they go the same direction as the toes. So that's rule number 1. Make sure the knees go the same direction as your toes. This applies to walking, running, going up and down stairs, lunging, squatting, hip hinging, anything, okay? So this is really important. Rule number 2, if you have knee pain, there's a decent chance that you've over-prioritized using your quad muscles and hinging through the knees rather than through the hips. So what does that mean? Oftentimes when people stand up from a chair, they're going to put the weight on the front of their feet, right? And they're gonna bring their knees over their toes, and they're gonna do this, and they're gonna stand up like this. And when we come forward through our knees, if I go to squat and the first thing I do is this, okay? I'm asking my knees to take the pressure of this movement. But if I take my butt and I push it back like this, and my knees remain more vertical, I'm teaching my hips to take the brunt of the movement, okay? And this is really important. You see a lot of people talking about, making sure to strengthen this knees over toes range of motion. That is important. But first, you have to learn how to prioritize moving through the hip, and then you can learn how to prioritize moving through the knee. And most people have that backwards. So when we go to stand up from a chair, instead of putting the weight on our toes and bringing our knees forward and standing up with a more upright torso, we want to do this. We want to plant the heels. You can even lift your toes if you want to remind yourself that this is primarily a heel movement. Knees are going the same direction as your toes. Bow forward from the hips, so belly button goes towards the thighs. You can use your hands for support if you need to, or not if you don't want to. Press the heels into the ground, and you're going to see how I'm hinging through the hip. So this motion is not a knee extension like this. It's a hip extension like this. And these muscles here, the glutes, the hamstrings, they're so much stronger than the other muscles that are surrounding your knee. And so we want to learn how to hinge through the hip and not necessarily hinge through the knee, okay? And so the last piece of this is we talked about weight distribution on the feet. We talked about knees going the same direction as your toes. And now I want to revisit what I just said at the end of there, which is hinging through the hip, okay? So knees are going the same direction as toes, putting the weight distribution on my heels, and then how do we learn how to hinge through the hip, okay? We start by pushing our butt backwards, okay? So the best way for people to practice this is this. Imagine there was somebody standing behind you and you wanted to knock them over, right? And you needed to do it like this, boom, and you push your butt back like that. That's how I want you to initiate any sort of sit to stand squat motion. Push the butt backwards, and that automatically puts the weight on the heels. Now look down, are my knees going the same direction as my toes? Yes. Now keep that motion going backwards as you sit down in the chair, and then reverse the motion as you stand up. And that's how we start to learn how to hinge through the hips. When we take the pressure off the knees by hinging through the hips, when we put the pressure on the heels, which also aids with hinging through the hips, and when we make sure the knees are going the same direction as your toes, your knees will feel so much better. So for everybody out there who has knee pain, start by treating these rules as something you want to practice every time you stand up from a chair. So every time you stand up from a chair, just pause. Weight on the heels, knees over toes, hinge to the hips, stand up from the chair, right? Every time you go to sit down, same thing. Butt goes back, knees over toes, weight in the heels, sit down in the chair. Okay? So now that you know the 3 keys to healthy knees, let's talk about range of motion. If you have an issue with being able to bend your knee fully, all right? So that means I'm down here like this and I'm trying to bring my body as close to my knee as possible and bring the knee over the toes, then what we want to do is something we call gapping the knee, okay? Now again, this is something you want to try out for yourself and see if it feels good. But for me, having had 4 knee surgeries on this knee, sometimes I wake up and I'm really stiff in the morning. And gapping the knee like this can feel incredibly good at creating that space so that I can have greater range of motion in my knee joint. So what you're gonna do is this, come to a kneeling position like this. Feel free to do it in your bed or somewhere soft. I don't want your kneecap on the ground behind you causing any pain, all right? Take a towel, nice big towel, roll it behind your knee like this and pull up in front. And then what you're gonna do is just bring your body weight over it. And what you'll notice is as your body weight comes down on this section of your knee, it's going to pry the joint open a little bit. Okay? So instead of it being closed, it's gonna create space inside the joint. And just go back and forth, creating space inside the joint like this, okay? That helps create space inside the joint. What you'll find is if before you were like, oh, I can't go past there, afterwards you might be like, whoa, I created significant more range of motion. Now, another way to do this for people who can't kneel is just lay down on your back, same thing, bring the towel up underneath your back like this, and then you can bring that foot down. And then you can even bring this foot on top of it if you need to, and just go back and forth and try to gap the knee that way, creating that range of motion. So you're just trying to feel like there's a little bit of pressure behind the knee, again, creating space in the knee joint, which can often create that extra range of motion that you need. So you can start with this move in the morning to kind of loosen up your knee, start to make it feel a little bit better as you create that extra range of motion. Now from there, we want to start building the ability to bring ourselves into the bottom of a squat. One of the most functional things that we can start to work towards is this ability to squat fully and relax in the bottom of a squat because it's a sign of fully functional knees. Now I know for a lot of people watching this, you're probably thinking to yourself, that will never happen. And while that may be true for you, or maybe it won't, maybe you can actually drop down in the squat. I've seen a lot of people gain significant range of motion by doing these movements. But maybe you won't. But by not practicing at all, it will get tighter and tighter and tighter over the years. And you'll have more and more aches, pains, and injuries, weakness, tightness, etc. So it's not a matter of whether you can get all the way down. It's a matter of whether you're making progress towards feeling better in your body, towards restoring range of motion in your body, towards caring for your body, or if you're just allowing your body to fall apart. But I'm gonna be honest with you. This is our one body, right? This is our one body that we all live in. So take care of it. So important to take care of it, all right? So this movement you can do in bed. I really recommend you do this one in bed, but you're gonna come to a quadruped position, so on all fours like this. And you're gonna bring your knees out kind of wide, whatever feels comfortable to you. You can play around with the position here. And then you have your toes pointed straight like this. And by the way, if you have ankle issues or anything like that, you can just take your feet to the edge of the bed and let your ankles just dangle naturally like that. So that don't have to worry about the ankles, okay? So from here, you can either do it on your hands or on your elbows. I like to do it on my elbows, but play around with both positions. You wanna make sure your back's nice and flat, okay? So in this position, we wanna just go forward a little bit, and then we wanna drop our butt towards our heels and let the hips open while maintaining a nice flat back. And just go back and forth like this, okay? And we're just trying to slowly go a little bit lower each time without doing this, okay? This is what we wanna avoid, is the butt rounding and the back rounding like this. So we're trying to create that little bit of an arch in the lower back, okay? Now a fun way to practice this, I don't have a regular water bottle, but I have a bottle of lotion right here, so I'm gonna show you how to do it, is you can tell your partner, your spouse, your friend, whoever you're with, right? Put something on that lower back, okay? And then as you come down, go, and then you'll start to feel it wanna roll, and you'll know, oh, that's probably the peak of my range of motion, and come back up. You also might tip your hips from side to side and might figure out that you're imbalanced. And so that's another way to notice when you're imbalanced is by having something on your back that could roll off or slide off from side to side, okay? So you can practice that as a way of giving you some proprioceptive feeling feedback on this movement. Now, if this movement feels pretty good for you, you can get your hips pretty far down, you're not tucking your tailbone like this, your back's relatively flat as you come down. Well, then the next movement I wanna work on for your knees is dropping into the bottom of a squat, all right? Now, simply resting in the bottom of a squat can be one of the most powerful things for opening up your hips, your ankles, your lower back, and your knees. But again, I don't want you to go too far too fast because oftentimes people will get really tight in these positions. It'll be hard to get out of them. So start somewhere where you feel comfortable and work your way up over time, all right? So my favorite way to do this is this. If you need to, You can put a couple cushions on the ground, but you start on a chair. You can put some cushions on the ground if you need to, and you can use those as support for you to relax into this position a little bit more. Or you can use your arm support behind you. So let's pretend I have cushions. I would just come out to the edge of the chair. I would sit on those cushions, and I would try to relax right here. And as my mobility started to open up, I'd shift my hips a little bit from side to side. I'd shift my knees, my ankles from side to side. I try to feel that range of motion, try to get a little bit deeper. Maybe I try to bow forward more from the hips, right? But what we want to do is just kind of pry the hips out and slowly work our way down, right? And one of the things that's really helpful when we're creating mobility like this, especially when we're taking a long time to do it, is your breathing pattern, okay? So the way I like to think about the breathing pattern is this: deep into the belly, like almost like you're trying to breathe into the pelvis. Down into there. Hold a little bit of tension, almost like you're trying to stand up from a squat, so you feel your legs working a little bit. And then as you exhale, relax all that tension and imagine that your tailbone is just being pulled down to the ground. So big breath in, a little bit of tightness, hold for a second, and then just open the hips, come down. Now, if you can start to, over time, you'll start to be able to bring your arms in front of you and hold this position. Then you can use your elbows to drive your knees out as you move from side to side. You can put your hands on your ankles and you can open your knees like this, right? We talked about gapping the knee. One of the things I sometimes do is I'll take my forearm and I'll put it between the knee and the bottom of the squat, and I'll kind of do this to create a little bit of space and gap the knee. So I know a lot of this is pretty advanced, and that's totally fine. I just want to show you kind of the opportunities of what you can do as you start to create more range of motion. But starting out, it could just be this. It could just be like, oh, I'm just opening my hips in a chair and I'm holding this for a minute or two and then I'm relaxing, right? That's totally fine. But the point of this all is we can't just neglect restoring range of motion to our knees. We want to practice restoring range of motion to our knees. And gapping the knee, using those two methods I showed you, doing the kneeling squat stretch, where we're really building that hip mobility and the ability to create range of motion in the knees, and then doing a basic squat stretch like this can be incredibly helpful for you. The point of this is, though, don't avoid ranges of motion just because they're challenging. You should be actually working on ranges of motion that are challenging, because when they challenge your body through flexibility, through strength, through coordination, through balance, that's what ultimately will help your body feel significantly better, okay? All right, let's talk about the tibs. This muscle right here on the front sides of your shins is called the tibialis anterior right here. This muscle and your quad muscles are primarily responsible for deceleration of motion. So what does that mean, okay? So deceleration of motion means this. If I'm walking forward and I go to stop, boom, like this, that stopping is these muscles creating tension to slow the movement forward down. So if I'm running and I go to stop, boom, I'm using my tibs, I'm using my quads. If I'm walking and I go to stop, tibs and quads. If I'm going downstairs and I want to stop, tibs and quads, right? So, and these are really common ways that people end up hurting themselves and they cause knee pain. Stopping quickly, going downstairs, etc. So we want to work on our tibs and quads. And so first I'm going to show you a move called the tib curl. Fantastic move to strengthen those muscles, right? And as a beginner variation, you can start by just being on the edge of a chair like this. And all you're going to do is straighten your legs, and you're going to point your toes down like this, and then you're going to lift your toes to your nose until you feel these muscles on the front sides of your shin fire. And then point the toes down, lift the toes to the nose, okay? And you're just going to do this, focusing not so much on the pointing. Like, I don't want you to feel your calves pumped like this, like we did with the calf rocks as much. I really want you to focus on the toes to the nose part, right? You can bring your hands behind you and lift your chest if you want to for better posture and good support. But just doing this where you're really focusing on lifting the toes to the nose on every single rep and doing it for anywhere between 30 to 90 seconds to create that nice pump in the fronts of the shins, okay? This is a fantastic move that you can do to really start to strengthen these muscles. And when these muscles get strong and active, again, they help decelerate motion and they make you feel significantly better. Now, next is the quads, okay? Oh my goodness, the quads are a big one, you guys. A lot of people end up injuring their knees and their quads turn off. And that means we lose our mind-muscle connection to our quads. And when we lose our mind-muscle connection to our quads, guess what happens? All of a sudden, we don't know how to support our knees anymore, right? So we try to do it through our hamstrings, through our hips, through our lower back, through our core, through our ankles, etc. But we need to reactivate those quads. So this is a really important drill for building solid mind-muscle connection. This is my favorite quad activation drill I've ever learned in my entire life. And I think it's something you should practice every single day if you feel like your quads are not doing their job of protecting your knee and strengthening around the knee. So it's gonna look like this. You're gonna come to a kneeling position, and again, should be like a really soft surface. You can do this on your mattress in bed, totally fine, you know, next to the headboard if you need support for balance. Like, do it in a place that's really comfortable. None of this should be pressure on your kneecap, okay? Now from there, if you're in this kneeling position like this, you're gonna wanna swing that back leg to almost like a 90-degree angle. So now I've got like a 90-degree angle between my front thigh and my back shin right here, okay? Then I'm gonna kind of turn about halfway between those two, 45 degrees. And then I'm gonna slowly come down towards my back heel and then extend the hips back up. Now here's the key here. This back foot right here, I'm pushing this back foot, the top of the foot, into the ground. So the moment I'm here, I push it into the ground, and immediately you should feel your quads start to shake and fire, okay? So I'm here, my quad's shaking and firing already. Now let the butt come back towards the heel, slowly. Oh, it gets harder, the quad's shaking more. And then extend the hip, squeeze the glute, push the toe into the ground, and extend the hip. And all you're gonna do is just go back and forth like this. Again, if you need something for your hands for support, that's fine, but you're just going back and forth, trying to get more range of motion, eventually trying to work your way down as low as you possibly can, and extending back up through that quad muscle and through the hip muscle. So we're learning two things here. We're learning how do we activate this quad as we go up and down, creating more quad strength, and then how do we extend the knee and extend the hip at the same time, using all the musculature of the hip and the quad here to create that extension that we want from things like squatting, lunging, running, etc. So with this particular movement, you can practice it, again, every single day. Why I keep saying every single day for a lot of these movements, by the way, is that we're talking about neurological change. We're talking about doing things repetitively so that way you regain range of motion where things are tight. That way you regain strength or access to muscles where you didn't have access before. And when you do this consistently, you can make significant progress really quickly. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that the moves I showed you will help you feel better in your body. If you want to feel even better in your body, well, then you can watch this video right here. Otherwise, if you want workouts that will make your whole body feel amazing, well, all you have to do is click the link below, take our free quiz, and we'll build you a personalized at-home workout plan that you can try out for free.